Silver, $30 in 2024. The guy who wrote the book, yes, the book on silver, came out with his prediction for silver for 2024, but he gave a plethora of reasons why. We're going to touch on all those, from demand for silver, supply of silver, long-term demand for silver, what the big banks are saying we should expect from silver, banks like BMO and JP Morgan Chase, and what the world geopolitical situation means for the price of silver, and of course, domestically here in the United States, what our current monetary and fiscal system means, you guessed it, for the price of silver. Peter Krauth, he wrote the book, The Great Silver Bull, widely considered to be the book on silver. I've read that much of it over the years. Susie got it for me for Christmas a few years back. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I read the whole book, but I'll tell you it is widely considered to be one of the best books about silver that's ever been written. And he gave an interview with Kitco recently. There's an article here from Ernest Hoffman. We're going to go through it all. It's massive. Okay, look, can you see this thing? This is like 9 pages long. I've got it highlighted. I distilled out of it what I thought was the most interesting and pertinent information. We're going to cover that. But first, let's talk about a more pressing matter. Some scary developments happening right now in the world. Let me read this to you. Hezbollah, we're talking about geopolitical risk and major events happening. This situation in Palestine, Israel, in the Middle East in general is a powder keg. We say it every time we talk about it. We don't want war. We don't want violence to occur, but this is what's happening, so we need to stay on top of it. The latest, we have Hezbollah strikes Israel intel base with 60-plus rockets as a quote-unquote initial response to a Hamas leader assassination. Why is this a big deal? Because Lebanon is to the north of Israel, okay? And they've said many times that if we get a two-front war going on with Israel, that this whole situation in the Middle East could quickly spiral out of control. We don't want that to happen, but the reports we're getting is that this is one of the most important Israeli military bases, and Hezbollah, of course, is linked to and backed by Iran. We got this whole Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestine, the whole Middle East, the Red Sea, like shut down, the Suez Canal, right? Guys, that's a big, big, big deal from an economic perspective. When the Red Sea is shut down, that's like the highway that they ship things from Asia to Europe and vice versa. And it has essentially been shut down. We got big developments going on there. Just wanted to keep you abreast of that, okay? Secondly, are things getting better in the Ukraine? It's almost, can you believe? That's almost been going on for 2 years now. 2 years in Ukraine, war in Europe. And we get this headline from Forbes magazine. Russia got 7,500-pound rockets from North Korea, okay, and promptly blew up a pair of Ukrainian supplied bases. So Russia is getting arms from North Korea. We know North Korea is a enemy, I guess you could say, of the United States. Now they're providing major bombs to Russia, which Russia is using to hurl into Ukraine. It says Russia is lobbing North Korean-made ballistic missiles at Ukraine from positions within the Russian border. So anyway, well, we won't go any deeper in that. We aren't a geopolitical show. We aren't a show that's casting judgment in terms of what's going on in the world, but we want to stay abreast because, guys, do you know, this is, what's his name? Mike Oliver. I heard him say this. Like one of the biggest drivers, the biggest underlying forces for the silver price and the gold price are geopolitical turmoil. A lot of the other things are just symptoms, right? The de-dollarization, the selling of the U.S. treasuries, however, all these other things are really symptoms of an underlying cause, which is geopolitical turmoil will drive the price of silver and gold as we go into the future. It's unfortunate. We would like everybody to get along, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later, how silver and gold have been a solution for that throughout history. But in the meantime, please don't forget, give this a thumbs up. This is a Snap live stream on a Sunday morning. We want to get this information out to as many people as possible. Thank you, yes, you, for being here. You're a basement dweller. Welcome, basement dweller. We're going to talk about silver. We're going to talk about gold. We're going to really focus in on silver, and we're going to get started on that right now because, like I said, this guy, right, Peter Krauth, good book. Well, from the 62 pages I've read, I can say it's good, but I know it's highly regarded. He shared just an unbelievable amount of information about what he sees going on with the silver price in 2024. And he starts out with this, and if you notice this, silver's in a paradoxical position at the start of 2024. On the one hand, industrial demand for the precious metal continues to grow, right? We know industrial demand, particularly from the solar and electrification sector, and supply of silver remains constrained. On the other hand, total demand actually fell 10% in 2023. All right, we're going to talk about that and why he says that we don't need to be too freaked out about that fact that we had a 10% drop in demand for silver, but prices remain stuck around 23 an ounce. Silver investors, yes, basement dwellers, that would be you and me, may be wondering how these two things can be true at once, right? But it will take for the gray metal to finally take off. According to Peter Krauth, editor of the Silver Stock Investor and author of The Great Silver Bull, the situation is complex. It's complicated, right? Basement dwellers, we know that. We're used to that in the silver world. But the outlook for 2024 and beyond remains very favorable, with the Fed set to provide even more upside than current projections are accounting for. All right, let's talk about demand, because did demand for silver collapse? Did it evaporate? Right? Is it the end of the world? Nobody wants silver anymore. Is that the case? Let's dig in and see what Peter has to say. Remember, he's the guru. He noted that the biggest drivers of this year's drop in overall demand were jewelry, silverware, and physical investment sectors, which were due for some correction after the outsized demand that we saw in 2022. Remember, 2022 was like a record-breaking year for silver demand. Okay? He says, quote, "That's not a big deal. Nearly all of these were at record highs or coming off record highs, so it's not completely surprising." Talking about record highs in 2022. If you look at jewelry and silverware in particular, India was a huge demand factor for 2022. Remember 2022, India imported like 300 million plus ounces of silver in 1 year. It was like, I forget the math we did on it, but it was like, I don't know, 45% of the total mine production for the year. India alone sucked in. All right, now let's talk about that. But he says it's reasonable that they've lightened up a bit, okay? They overstocked. He says, jewelry was a big contributor, silverware less so, but jewelry dropped by about 50 million ounces. So demand for silver for jewelry dropped by 50 million ounces. That's maybe 5% of the total supply. But the big decrease in demand, was net physical investment, which was down by about 70 million ounces in 2023, from 333 million to 263 million ounces this year. If you add those two together, that basically accounts for the whole drop. Quote, "Physical investment was off the charts in 2022, 333 million ounces. And if you look at jewelry last year, that was he's talking about 2022, that was also off the charts at 235 million ounces. These two categories were just so outsized compared to where they've been. So it's just not all that surprising that we're seeing things come back down to earth a little bit. So we had a decrease in demand from investors, from jewelry, from silverware, okay? But it was a decrease from record highs in 2022. So 2023 had the decrease, 2022 had the records. Now let's take a step back and think about something, okay? Most of this demand right now is coming from Eastern countries like India, like China, okay? What do we know? I mean, you're probably like me. Every time you turn around, you hear something about how India's economy is growing. China's economy is growing. We just got news last week that China's economy is doing pretty well. But on top of that, they've got a big difference over there. Their middle class is expanding and expanding. The number of consumers that are joining the middle class in India, in China. Remember the BRICS, right? BRICS, the IC, the I in the C in BRICS, India and China, each have 1.4 billion people in their population. That's almost 3 billion people. That's almost 10 times the population of the United States. And 10 times? That's crazy. Okay? And their middle classes are expanding. And they love precious metals. It's different over there. Okay, my children are friends with Indian children that they go to school with. Their parents, many of whom were born in India. Anytime I talk to them about silver and gold, their eyes light up. They love to talk about it, and they say yes, it's much different in India than it is in the United States. I don't really know any Chinese people that well, a few, but I can't honestly tell you I've talked with them about silver and gold, but Indian people love gold and silver. So this little decrease, we're not going to get too crazy upset about it. And remember, 10% demand decrease overall for silver in 2023. It's hard to keep all these years straight. 10%, okay? That's bad. But in the face of that bad news, silver still was flat for the year. What is that telling us? When the demand turns around for jewelry, for investment, for silverware, we never talk about silverware, do we? I think, anyway, it's going to be a new flood of money coming into the sector. So hang on, it'll get better, okay? What about supply? What does Peter Krauth have to say about the supply? Krauth said the deficit that we have, and we still have a deficit, nonetheless, the deficit represents the true net position that the market is in, the true position that we still are in a position with the silver market where there's more silver being demanded every year than the mines and recycling can meet, okay? He says, quote, if you look at supply, it's very telling that mine production is down 2% when demand is at the second highest level on record. So even though we had that demand go down, it's still at the second highest on record. And recycling is expected to grow only 1% this year and will have little impact because it's only 15% of the market. 85% of the silver that comes to the market comes from mines. That 85% chunk is shrinking because the miners can't find silver. They can't afford, because the price is too artificially low to develop new silver mines, okay? Here's what he says. A significant bump in mining production also isn't in the cards. Krauth pointed out that when Bank of America Global Research surveyed the 13 largest silver producers about their supply outlook, the consensus was basically, quote, we're not ever going to get back to the 2016 highs in mine supply for any number of years going forward. There are just too many challenges when it comes to funding, permitting, building. All the constraints of bringing a new mine to market are there, and they're just getting tougher and tougher and tougher all at a time when more and more silver is being demanded. I'm going to have a sip of coffee. A little more. This is interesting. The mine supply is really over 80% of the total supply, Krauth said. So when mine supply is not going to grow, And yet we have all these very realistic forecasts that demand is going to continue to grow in a very healthy way, that the deficits are going to stay very much elevated for years to come. I just have a hard time seeing how supply is ever really going to catch up. Okay, long-term demand. Let's switch over to that. What's the long-term demand picture according to Mr. Krauth? The demand forecasts have indeed been high. A report from Oxford Economics for the Silver Institute projects total demand growth of 42% between now and 2033, which is double the growth rate of the last 10 years. So over the next 10 years, we're anticipating double the growth rate of what we had over the last 10 years. Even demand from jewelry and silverware is projected to continue up. Investment demand. Here we go. This is investment demand is the little secret ingredient, the last piece of the puzzle that could be the catalyst for significantly higher silver prices. Investment demand. Where does he see an outsized recovery in 2024? It's from the investment community. Krauth says, quote, I do think that the net physical investment is going to surprise somewhat to the upside. Okay, demand was 163 million ounces this year. I think we're probably looking at high 200s, maybe 282 or 290 in terms of net physical demand for 2024. He acknowledged that while significant economic slowdown or a recession would likely boost investment demand, it would also be expected to have a negative impact on industrial demand. He says, I don't want to discount industrial. Some people will say if we get a recession, it's going to impact silver. I guess the short answer is yes, but probably less than we might expect. A lot of the reason for that is there's so much growth and support for solar and the green energy transition. Let's talk about what the big banks, excuse me. Let's talk about what the big banks are saying, okay? TD Securities said they believe the silver price could see a difficult start to the year. Now, we've kind of had that, but they're projecting $26 by mid-2024. Says, quote, since silver has a high beta to gold with double the rate of volatility, the white metal is projected to outperform this year. Krauth agreed with TD's analysis that the factors holding silver back in 2023 will become supportive in the second half of 2024. But he thinks they're actually being too conservative. You ready for what Krauth says regarding the silver price? I think we're going to see silver reach closer to $28 in the first half of 2024. And in the second half of the year, we could potentially see it reach as high as $30 per ounce. That's what Krauth, the guy that wrote the book, is telling us. J.P. Morgan, commodity analysts, were even more emphatic about their case for silver prices. They predict that silver will be among the few areas of strength in the broader commodity sector. Across commodities, the only structural bullish call we hold is on gold and silver, they wrote, adding a breakout rally is expected around mid-year 2024. Yes, J.P. Morgan, that J.P. Morgan, the same J.P. Morgan that's been accused and convicted of manipulating the precious metals prices, is calling for a breakout rally mid-2024. Maybe they can, and Rick Rule brought this up. How does this, we talk a lot about manipulation of the metals prices. And I believe it was Rick Rule that said this. One of the big analysts said this, and it was a new idea that I hadn't thought of. Maybe it'll be a new idea for you right now that you've never thought of. And it was about 6 weeks ago that I learned this. But if we think back over the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, we know the price of silver, the price of gold had been manipulated. There are people who have spent pretty much their entire career dedicated to proving that to be the case. There's been lawsuits. There's been recent convictions, okay? Look, The reason, think about these manipulators. What do they care about? They're greedy. They want to make money, right? Well, we all want to make money. So, we can understand, but they're the manipulators. They've manipulated the price on the COMEX and the LBMA with futures, with leverage, all that crazy stuff. We got to remember something. They're just as happy manipulating the price up as well. And that a big reason why they manipulated the price down over the last number of decades is because that was the path of least resistance. That was the easier way to push the metals. If we get into an environment, much like we did in the 1970s, excuse me, we get into an environment that's much more supportive for the silver price and gold price, those manipulators are just as happy to make money pushing the price up and up and up as well. That could help. That could help. We're not in favor of price manipulation, but we got to remember, they will be just as happy to push the price upward as they were to push the price downward. Hey guys, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up. If we can get to 100 thumbs up today, we're going to ring that bell 10 times. BMO. Let's see what BMO had to say. Commodities analysts at BMO Capital Markets, for their part, upgraded their already positive forecast for silver in their 2024 outlook. The analyst said that the commodity price estimates would typically move down amidst slower. Hey, thank you for that super chat, Jim. Thank you. Okay. Amidst the global slowdown in muted industrial output. However, on a combination of several short-term and long-term factors around supply, demand, and cost, we have, in the main, upgraded our outlook. So BMO says they also expect to see an increase in sovereign wealth funds and alternative investment funds looking to secure physical material based on expectations of longer-term price appreciation. This could see investors competing with consumers for materials. What they're talking, thank you, Metal Seer. Wow, guys, thank you for the super chats. It's a nice thing for you to do on a Sunday morning. Always appreciated, never expected. Let's get back to this. What they're saying, what BMO saying, what they're saying is that we could see like hedge funds, big investment funds, starting to basically hoard silver. Okay. So look, if you want to get your hands on some silver, some gold, some platinum before the big guys potentially start to hoard it, let's say thank you to our channel sponsor, Pimbex. Having voice trouble. Pimbex, Pimbex.com, online bullion dealer. They've got silver, they've got gold, they've got platinum. They have a great reputation, but you need to learn that for yourself. Next time that you're out shopping around for any of the precious metals and you're looking at online bullion dealers, do yourself a favor, throw Pimbex into the mix. I got an email last night, or a message, a comment. CoinShop Chris shared it with me from one of our viewers. It really is true. Their prices are always almost impossible to beat, and their service ranks up there just as high as well. Pimbex, Pimbex, and if you ever decide to consider converting an IRA into physical metal, make sure you talk to the guys at Pimbex as well. Okay, they can help with IRA conversions, and I think you'll discover that they can get you more metal for your money. Thank you, Pimbex, for your ongoing support. What BMO's talking about with the, and we've heard several people talk about this potential. There's so much demand for silver from the solar industry. Excuse me, from the electronics industry, right? Not so much right now from the investment community, but there's so much demand. The big electronics companies, Sony, Samsung, Apple, Tesla, all right, the big solar panel manufacturers, they need so much silver that and the Silver Hermit, our friend who was on the channel a few months ago, talks about this as well, that as soon as one of them starts to hoard silver, as soon as Tesla starts to hoard silver, as soon as Samsung starts to hoard silver, as soon as a big hedge fund starts to hoard silver, doesn't this sound like the Hunt brothers a little bit? Right? But the situation's different now fundamentally for a much more, let's say, a new floor to be established in silver. We could potentially get into a situation where we have a rush of companies trying to secure the metal, and then quickly they realize that there's just not that much metal there. We're going to talk about some crazy statistics here in a little bit. I think I missed a super chat. Was that another one, Jim? Wow. Hold on a second. I'm losing my voice. Our friend Jim M. Thank you for your super generosity this morning. Very much appreciated, okay, on many levels. Jim M. as a moderator, as a friend of the channel, and very generous with super chats. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate it. Hey, guys, don't forget, we get to 100 thumbs up. I'll ring the bell 10 times this morning, okay? Silver. Quote, this is from BMO. Silver simply cannot decouple itself from the fortunes of gold, and the two will typically move together in any given cycle. BMO analyst wrote, however, silver does offer more torque at points of inflection, partly due to liquidity and partly due to the different ways the market trades. We've talked about that ad nauseum. Silver has a lot of catching up to do to the current gold price alone. If gold does what they're saying gold is going to do, and we're not talking a lot about gold today, but if we get that gold price above 2,100, and then it goes to the 2,500, 2,600, I'm predicting 2,600, silver's got a lot of catching up to do, and it's going to have to do it very, very quickly. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, okay? It's going to happen, right? Look, I don't have a crystal ball. Don't make any financial decisions based on anything that I'm saying, but for me, I believe it's going to happen. You need to make up your mind for yourself. Let's talk about one of the final factors that he writes about when it comes to the silver situation. De-dollarization may do for silver what it's doing for gold. Okay, listen. Krauth said that prospects for growing monetary reserves by governments combined with strategic reserves to support industry, okay? So silver as a monetary metal, silver, right, as governments are wanting to increase their strategic reserves to support industry, could be very powerful new driver for silver prices if it occurs. If you start to see government step in, it's really curious how silver has yet to have been declared a critical metal in some of the bigger places, he said. But I would argue it's at very least a strategic metal. You can't hardly argue that, given how important it is to solar panels. And we could add electronics, many other factors as well. Okay? The implications of de-dollarization and diversification increasingly boosting demand for silver, as they have for gold over the last 2 years, are also profound. That's dramatic to consider. Right? As the world is moving, silver's got these two crazy, interesting components, right? The monetary side of it, right? The wealth preservation, the safe harbor side, however you want to say, right? This, with all the geopolitical craziness going on in the world right now, it is that safe haven monetary component. And at the same time, this industrial component, which what he's saying is governments could become very interested, big companies and big governments, in hoarding silver to protect their economy from an industrial perspective and from a monetary perspective, okay? Here we go. Gold and silver are the ultimate anonymous liquid alternatives. We talk about strategically the applications for silver, in particular as a critical metal, but also in terms of sovereignty. This is interesting. These things can start to become a lot more attractive, and we know the major nation central banks want to move away from the dollar. I'm going to take a break here real quick and have a sip of coffee. I'll be right back. Thank you, Metal Seer. Wow. Q for Ron or anyone. Why is silver never considered to back currency as gold has traditionally been used? That's a great question, Metal Seer. Let me have a sip of coffee and we'll talk about that in a second here. All right, we're back on. Metal Seer, I think I can lead into this question with this last point I wanted to make about silver and gold. And I've heard this just recently. And what is this? Let's see if this makes sense to you as a silver investor, as a gold investor. That gold and silver are the ultimate hegemonies. I can't say the word, hegemony, the ultimate power, right? We talk about that word, hegemony. The United States was the world hegemony for the last 50 years, whatever the case may be. The world is changing, right? We have this bifurcation. We have the BRICS. We have the BRICS Plus. We have this new power structure being established. And some of the BRICS countries are saying, we don't want a hegemony. We don't want to be the hegemony, but we don't want a world power. We want more cooperation. And silver and gold are the conduit for that cooperation. And I believe we're starting to see that right now as central banks around the world are accumulating massive amounts of gold. But silver and gold allow for, how do I say, a stability. They require countries to tether their monetary system. And when we have a system that's more backed by real metal, people know what they're getting. It eliminates the ability for a lot of financial games to be played, money printing, right? Debt creation out of nothing, right? Everything has to be backed by the metal. So Metal Seer asks about why silver. I think gold has just traditionally been the pure monetary asset. Okay, now from what I understand, silver was actually used as money before gold was. But if we look back over the last, most recent several thousand years, gold has been the predominant metal when it comes to money. Either way, Metal Seer, and to any of you that are watching right now, I think that a system based on the metals, silver and gold together, right? But they call it bimetallic, I guess, that provides for that stability that we haven't seen for a long time and could provide for a very interesting environment as we head out into the future. The last thing he touches on are Fed cuts, dollar decline, in the potential for a real rocket ship, that if the dollar goes down in value, if bonds go down further in value, and we've talked about this a lot as we move into 2024, we are moving into a very rocky period. Whether you listen to me, whether you listen to any of the top analysts that are out there, Jim Ricker. I mean, these guys, we are in a very precarious financial situation in the United States. The likelihood of the dollar going down in value, I'm not talking about it going away. Sure, anything could happen, but the continued trend toward de-dollarization, the continued trend toward countries not wanting to buy our treasuries could lead to fantastic returns in the silver price, which is what Mr. Krauth was referring to, but also in the gold price as well. We could see events unfold that would lead to, if we get into this scenario that we're looking at right now, I mean, think about as we head into next year. We still have inflation. Okay, we still have. Let's just take this is critical. We still have high inflation. The Fed has not met their inflation goal. They're 2%, right? But that's their whole point, is to have the system set up that robs us of 2%. But they haven't even got back to that yet with all these massive interest rate rises. We still have high inflation, and they're already talking about cutting rates next year. I think the Fed is saying 3 times, the market's saying 6 times. But what does that create, right? If we already have inflation, let's say officially 3 or 4%, and they start to cut rates because the economy's slowing down, that would mean we have a stagnating economy with inflation. Now, you've heard me say a zillion times, there's no more fertile or lucrative environment for the silver price and the gold price than a stagflationary environment. So that's, I think, and I'm not putting words into the author's mouth here, but that's what I think he's referring to when he talks about the fact that we could see extraordinary gains in silver and gold over the next year, over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The situation, I don't know, is it just me? But when I look out there, it looks very likely that we will at minimum see more money printing. The only way they can get out is by monetizing the debt, by devaluing the U.S. dollar further. And I'm not talking about the DXY index. We've been down that road. That's just a comparison of horrific currencies to one another. I'm talking about real value. Okay? All right. Let's thank our second channel sponsor who makes Ron's Basement possible, Fortuna Silver Mines. They're a global silver and gold mining company. Yes, they have mines in Mexico, Peru, Argentina, Cote d'Ivoire, which is also known as the Ivory Coast. I'm telling you guys, I knew nothing about gold mining in West Africa until Fortuna actually started to build mines in that area. And it is a fascinating part of the world, right? A lot of Americans know very little about Africa, but that section of West Africa produces a tremendous amount of gold. It's very developed. It's very interesting. If you get some time, check it out. Actually, if you go to the Fortuna Silver website, fortunasilver.com, they got a lot of information about their operations in West Africa, but other information just in general about what's going on in that region. It's something that I think if you dive into a little bit, you'll find quite interesting. I've owned Fortuna stock for years and years. I'm not offering financial advice. I'm just telling you what I've done. I love the company, the management. I like their fortress balance sheet. Again, if you want to learn more about Fortuna, go check them out, fortunasilver.com. Thank you, Fortuna, for the sponsorship. This situation in the Middle East is not good. The situation in Europe is not good. I cannot believe it. I missed a super chat. Hold on. Let me pop out the chat. We're having all kinds of technical snafus this morning. Metal Seer, to pronounce hegemony, say these 4 words: hegemony. Thank you, Metal Seer. I owe you $5. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you to Jim M for the super chats. Thank you for being here. When we get 3 more of these guys, we'll ring the bell 10 times, okay? We're a community here in the basement. Lots of nice people, right? Please subscribe to the channel. We're always trying to grow our subscriber base, have more people join us here in the basement. You're always welcome here, right? It's a bunch of people, but the number one most important one really is always you, because without you, there is no Ron's Basement. It's not RonTube, it's YouTube. So thank you for being here. Let's touch on a couple more quick points regarding silver. I ran across this. I was thinking about China. Now, we talked earlier about India, right? India has 1.4 billion people, and I'm going to ring the bell because we just got to 100 thumbs up. Then we're going to talk about some interesting things with silver in China. 10 rings of the bell for 100 thumbs up. Thank you, guys. All right. China has 1.4 billion people also, just like India. Chinese people love gold, and they're starting to love silver. On a big level, China is selling U.S. treasuries and dollars, right? That's going to continue to put downward pressure on the real, almost knocked my coffee over, the real value of silver and gold, right? They're going to go up and up. But what's interesting, we know the Chinese are one of the top producer in the world of gold, right? silver. They're a major producer as well. But the central bank, I'm reading, might be starting to buy some silver, but they are encouraging their people to buy silver. The Chinese government is encouraging their people to buy silver. We know the Chinese smelters are screaming that we need more silver. The Chinese government is had public announcements on their TV, state TV, encouraging their people. They have new silver products going out. We know what's going on with gold in China, right? The little gold beads, the little 1 gram gold beads. A gram is like a 1/30th of an ounce. And the young Chinese people are collecting these little gold beads. Now the Chinese government is also encouraging their people to hold and buy silver. Okay, and on a silver front, we also know that the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which also trades silver, and the Shanghai Futures Exchange, right, that the price of silver over there has gone higher and higher and higher. Now, look, when we talk about the silver market, let's get a little perspective on this thing, okay? Okay? It's a small, sensitive market, the silver market. We know what, 1 billion ounces roughly. Now it seems like that's going down and down, but there's about 1 billion ounces between mining and recycling, and most of that's from the mining companies that's provided every year. 1 billion ounces of silver, you might say. Don't forget, right? There's more demanded every year than is supplied. However, that billion ounce market, that's $25 billion worth of silver. I'm going to give you some perspective. Last I looked, Home Depot, the big orange hardware store here in the United States, that company alone has a market cap of $300 billion. That means, if my mathematics are correct, that Home Depot, just that one hardware store, their market cap is 10 times the size of all the silver that is produced in the world in an entire year. Okay? But it still makes no sense to me that when I pull up Yahoo Finance, they have the Dow, the S&P, the NASDAQ, whatever, and then right there next to it, there it is, silver and gold. All right? It's a small, sensitive market that can move very, very quickly. All right? We know what happened 10 months ago. You hear it almost every time I talk to you, but remember 10 months ago how quickly the silver market moved from on the retail investor side, from a surplus to a deficit. This thing can move, and it can move super quickly. So when we pull it all together, what's going on, big picture in the world? Things are not getting better in the Middle East, right? Things are not getting better in Europe. When we look at what's going on, we just look at the United States. Things are not getting better in the United States. We're heading into a crazy year as we're only, 6 or 7 days here into 2024. It's going to be a crazy year, whether we want to look at it politically, economically, from a monetary perspective, from a fiscal perspective. Things are getting crazy. When we look at the silver market itself, like Mr. Krauth showed, right, the fundamentals underneath the silver market, and then we consider how small this silver market really is, okay? We could hit a point of time where we're looking at triple-digit silver. Keith Neumeyer can talk about it. We can talk about it, right? We could be looking back thinking it's like the silver black swan. Remember the definition of a black swan event. It's a major event that occurs that you should have seen coming, but you didn't, right? In hindsight, you look back and you say, oh, it seems so obvious. It seems so obvious. So are we going to be in a position 6 months, 2 years, 5 years from now, where we have much higher silver prices and we look back and say, it was so obvious? It was so obvious. I don't know, because 2 years ago and 3 years ago, quite honestly, there were a lot of people saying that that was the case back then as well. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. One thing for sure, I'll be here with you through it all. I appreciate you joining me at the drop of a hat, a spur of the moment live stream this morning. You're the most important part of Ron's Basement, right? Hope you have a great day, and I'll plan on seeing you tomorrow.